Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Do you ever wonder if you're on the right path? Are you spending your time doing what is important in your life? Or do you dream of a life with more time to spend on things that are important? If so, then you're in for a treat today because we have Lisa Jansen, author of Life Done Differently, One Woman's Journey on the Road Less Traveled. Lisa's book chronicles her life as she moved from a marketing executive to living in a camper van exploring the outdoors. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Richard. Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear more about your story. Let's start with you released Life Done Differently last year. And what led you to putting out a book about your experiences?
Yeah, great question. And I've heard that question a few times. And funnily enough, for me, it's sort of the writing part was kind of just what I do. I love writing. I've always done that. It's sort of my way of, thinking things through and processing. So it kind of felt natural to write a book about this journey that I had been on that had been so, life-changing for me. But then, I got to a point where I had sort of, it wasn't really a full book, but I had something that could quite easily become a book, and then I started to think about, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I was a little bit reluctant at first to publish it because it's such a personal story, and as anyone who's ever put anything out there in the world these days knows, it's only a matter of time before someone hates it and tears it apart, and so you sort of set yourself up for that. And of course that's kind of hard to do when it's your life and a story you care about so much. But I really think that the world needs more stories from and about people who are doing things differently. I've read a bunch of really amazing books, around that topic, and it's been so helpful and so inspiring to me. And so I wanted to do my part to contribute to that. And hopefully, someone picks that up and it inspires them to do something amazing with their life.
That's beautiful. And that is, we're kind of fed this, lifestyle of go to school, go to university, get a job, work for 40 years. And for some people, that's perfect. For some people, they want a different lifestyle. And so I think it's beautiful when people share their stories. Your book is about change. And so can you maybe talk about where you were and why you decided you needed a change?
Yeah, absolutely. So I pretty much did the very typical life, right? I went to school and then I went to uni. And while I was at uni, I moved from Germany to New Zealand. So maybe that's a little bit unusual, but at the same time, lots of people do that these days. And so I finished university in New Zealand, and then I got a job and working in marketing, and I worked my way up pretty quickly from, sort of marketing assistant to being marketing manager and then head of marketing. And so very much on that traditional path in life. And then I got to a point where I was in my early 30s and all my friends were getting married, having kids, and that sort of was the natural next step at that point in life, right? And so for me, it was just a funny moment because it wasn't, to everyone else, it sort of seemed to be a given that that's what you do next. And to me, it wasn't. And I started to question that and, started to question whether that's the path I wanted to follow. But then even more so, I was, okay, what else do you do? What else is there? If you don't want to do that. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to do the whole, get married, have kids thing. But more importantly, I started to ask myself, what else is there? What do people do with their lives if they don't want to follow that traditional path around marriage and kids and careers? And so that's kind of how it all started with that, just that question. And I couldn't really find an answer. The only, I think maybe role models or examples I could see were people who traveled, who'd spent their life traveling or career focused. I've met some people and know some people who chose not to have kids and marriage, but then were really, really career focused. And I also mostly read about people who, spent their life traveling and adventuring around the world. And even though both of those options sort of, seemed, there was something attractive in both of them, neither of them was like, yeah, that's exactly me. That's, what I want to do. And yeah, so in the end, I decided I'm going to find out for myself. And so originally the decision was that I decided to take a summer off from work, and I bought a camper van, and I decided I'm going to spend the summer traveling in my camper van and just having a time out. And like I said, up until then, I'd been very much on that traditional trajectory and always working really hard. And I just wanted to take some time away and basically figure out who I am when I'm not working, 40, 50 hours a week. And so that's how it started as a summer. And then that summer turned into, 6 years and counting. So
do you think starting that way, just saying, okay, I'm going to do this for a few months, when you did that, did you think this could become a new way of life, or was it just, let's just kind of go with the flow and see what happens?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Sometimes I wonder about that. And I sort of, when I wrote the book, I went back through my old journals to sort of, so exactly how did I actually feel at the time? And so reading through that now, there was definitely a desire for a big life change. So, somewhere within me, there was definitely that I don't just want a summer. I want a real, change. I want a different kind of life, a different direction. But officially and, to myself too, by positioning it just as this, this is something I do for a summer. And if it doesn't work, then I can just go back to the life I had before. Just made it a lot easier. It just made it a lot less scary and a lot less intimidating. And so that made it easier for me, but also for people in my life to kind of just get on board with it and get excited about it and really enjoy it, rather than having all these, thoughts and fears about, oh, is it going to work out? Is this it? Is this what I'm going to do, for my life, and all those questions. So, I think, yes, I was looking for something more long-term, but the specific, travel in a van, I really, I guess in a way tricked myself to think about it as a short-term thing to make it, less scary.
And so what was life like for you that first summer? Did you notice, changes in how you felt, or, how did you spend your time?
It was amazing. I mean, I had never really done sort of camper van travel or anything before. So it was sort of, I just jumped into it, not really knowing what to expect. And I just loved it. The lifestyle just suited me so well. I loved the simplicity of it, the flexibility of it, and especially that first summer, there was a lot of adventure and exploring new places and that whole excitement about it. And I noticed changes in myself really, really quickly, just feeling a lot more relaxed, much better clarity. I describe it as, it sort of felt a bit like there was this fog lifted off my life that I didn't even really know was there. You all of a sudden have this clarity about, who I am and how I wanted to live my life and what mattered. And just that, I've learned a lot over the years, and, van life and living this way has taught me so many lessons, but the most valuable is still something that I learned that first summer. And that's how little I need to be happy and to live a really good life. I went from living in a modern, nice house in Auckland, which is New Zealand's biggest city, and I had, all these clothes and shoes and, all that stuff that you have. And I went from that to living in a small van with really only, the things you need. So your 3 or 4 outfits and 2 or 3 pairs of shoes, and life was, so simple, and I was happier than I'd ever been or had been in a long, long time. And it just really made me realize, I don't need all that stuff. And to me, that was freedom, because once I realized I don't need all the stuff, I also realized, hey, I don't have to work 40, 50 hours a week the next, 30, 40 years of my life to afford the kind of life that's going to make me happy. And so that was sort of a real, changing moment, a real tipping point in my life, because from there on, I was like, okay, if I'm not going to have to work 40, 50 hours a week, now I have all this extra time and this freedom. What am I going to do with it? And what do I want to do with it? What's going to fulfill me? What's going to make me happy? And that really set me up for, everything that's happened since. And that happened, that first summer, within the first sort of 3-4 months on the road, I had that kind of realization. It was really amazing.
And so, 3 months in, you kind of decided you're not going back to your conventional life. What did your friends or family say when, this summer was going to become your full-time life?
Yeah, look, I think at that point, most of them were in surprise because I think everyone just saw right away how much I loved it and how happy I was. And also, a lot of my friends just loved the adventure. And I actually, I have to say I'm very lucky that from the very beginning, everyone in my life that mattered, everyone close to me, was really supportive of it and really excited for me and was sort of, kind of partly living through me and being on this adventure with me. Any sort of, criticism or negativity always came from strangers, not from people, close to me. And I think especially at that point, everyone had seen how happy I was and so it just sort of, felt natural. No one really asked any questions. Everyone was like, oh yeah, so she's just going to keep doing this.
I think back to years ago reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and I'm sure many people have read it. I haven't met many people who have actually done it, but it seems to me this is what you've done, is you found this balance in terms of how much you need to work and how much you need to play. Can you maybe talk about how you figured out how much work you had to do and, how you found work, working remotely where you don't have an office, you don't know where you're going to be a week from now. And so, making commitments maybe is a bit more difficult than a conventional job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start this by saying that I have read The 4-Hour Workweek and I'm actually not a fan because I just think it takes it too far and too extreme. Like, I think 4 hours a week is unrealistic for the far, far majority of us. And there might be a few lucky ones that have, made it work. But I just think, look at how many millions people have read that book and how many of them have actually made it a reality. Hardly anyone, right? So I think...
None.
Yeah. Exactly. And so one of the, things for me is, I still work hard and I still... so for me, I've sort of figured out that, to live the way I want to, which is a, fairly simple and basic life, I need to work 20 hours a week to, cover my cost and to save enough to feel comfortable long term, right? Because I'm not someone, I am someone who values financial security. Funnily enough, a lot of people, find it surprising when they hear about my lifestyle, but saving for the future and having a retirement plan are things that are important to me, and also having, a decent savings account. And so for me, 25 hours a week of work is sort of the sweet spot. So that's a lot more than 4, right? And of course, then you also have to be realistic. So I work as a marketing consultant and freelancer. I'm kind of like a virtual marketing manager that, companies, either they don't need a full-time marketing manager or they have a marketing team, but they need some extra resources for certain projects or certain times. And so I work for clients, right? Which, yes, I have probably a lot more flexibility than someone who's in a 9-to-5 employment in an office, but I still have commitments and accountability to clients. So it's not like I can do whatever the hell I want every day of my life. I have meetings and I have expectations to meet from clients. And I also have times where, clients need work urgently. And then I am working 40 hours a week and sometimes more to deliver that, right? And so I think that's something where, it's a bit of a reality check as well, that sometimes what you see on social media or in books, like the 4-Hour Workweek really only works for a minority of people. For most of us, even if we have this better balance and better lifestyle, it's still hard work and still commitments. But so for me, yes, that's how I work, sort of 25 hours a week. Marketing work is my sweet spot. I'm very, very lucky that I get pretty much all of my work through referrals and word of mouth. And that's kind of where, New Zealand is a small country and we're all very close connected. Everyone sort of knows each other. And so that's worked really in my favor. But also, because I do take my job serious and I'm committed and I do good work for clients. And so I get, referrals or people I've worked for in the past come back for more. So that's usually how it works.
Is there a struggle that, your clients want you to do more? And, you have a relationship with them, you've helped them, you're obviously, very conscientious. Is it hard for you sometimes to be like, oh, geez, I've got to turn down work and not go to a 40-hour, work week out of your camper van?
Oh, absolutely. And look, it's so interesting because I often get asked about this, how did you get this amazing work-life balance? And honestly, I don't feel like I've really figured it out. It's such a balancing act all the time. And I've, over the years, at 2 or 3 times ended up back in situations where I said yes to way too much work because I'm really bad at saying no and I don't want to let anyone down. And so then I'm, back in the situation where I'm really stressed and way too busy. And then I need to pull myself back out of that. And so that's sort of an ongoing work in progress to figure out that work-life balance. And I've really, had to learn a lot about that over the years and had to learn that, even though I find it hard to say no to clients and to turn them down, it is a lot better than me, ending up in a situation where I'm struggling with, my mental health and I'm just not feeling positive and I don't have energy because I've taken on too much. So something I'm working on, I think I've become a lot better just with setting expectations with clients. And, in the beginning, because I felt so grateful that, people let me work this way. And, this was before COVID. So working remotely, working virtually was, very uncommon at the time. And so I felt so grateful that I always, felt like I had to be contactable all the time and I always had to do all the work right away and, sort of like overdid it a little bit. And I've just learned over the years to, set some boundaries, set better expectations, be clearer about when I'm available and when things can get done. But very much a work in progress. So if anyone out there has truly figured this out, let me know how you did it because I'm still working on it.
So, you're working 15 to 20 hours less a week. You've also gotten rid of the morning and afternoon commute and probably, you're running, for lunch down at, the deli or whatever. So you have a lot more time than an average person your age. How do you spend the extra hours?
Yeah, great question. So I write books for starters. So that's and I think that's something really important also to point out. When I say I work 20, 25 hours a week, that is my marketing work. I do, don't consider writing books work as such. Maybe I should. But yeah, so that's kind of, that what happened. So when I started this back 6.5 years ago now, the whole point of it was, okay, figuring out, what do I want to do? Who am I when I'm not spending all this time working? And so initially I went to the extreme and, the first summer I was working 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. And it was really about creating that space for new things to come into my life. And I'm a big believer that, if you want change, you have to create space for it. If you, just keep doing what you're always doing and you have this busy life, then how is something going to change, right? Whereas there's not going to be any room for anything new. And so I created that space and, just to see what would happen, what would come. And one of the first things that came was writing. And I spent a lot more time writing. I wrote my first book back in 2017, 2018, something like that, right early on in that first year. And then, 2 other books after that, including Life Done Differently. But I also spend a lot of time doing things that really fulfill me. Like I love being out in nature and being active in nature. I hike, I kite surf, I try to surf. I'm really bad at it. I go for walks, I ride my bike. I love to read. I love to just, sit and daydream and drink coffee without having to rush to the next thing or worrying about my to-do list with, 20 things on it. So some of that, extra time is filled with, I guess, what people would call productive things. And some of it is filled with just fun and enjoying life and making the most of it.
It seems your life has just become a lot more intentional and also not as frantic. Like it just seems like a really nice lifestyle, the way you described it. Is that kind of how you feel about it as well?
Yeah, 100%. And that was the whole point of it. And I like that you just used the word intentional, because for me, that's what it's ultimately all about. I don't, it's, of course, like the adventure and living in a van is exciting and all of that stuff, right? But what it always comes down to me and this whole like Life Done Differently, which is the book, but also, a blog that I've been writing since the beginning. And Life Done Differently for me means living with intent, being present, knowing yourself, listening to yourself, and living life the way that works for you and that makes you happy. Of course, with consideration for other people. I always say, do what makes you happy as long as no one else gets hurt. So you do have to consider other people in that. But yeah, just that, and that having that intention and that presence, that to me is really what it's all about.
So when you talk to others about your journey, I suspect a lot of people say, "Oh, I'd love to do that." What do you think's holding them back from doing what you did, almost not on a whim, but you did something that ended up being a major change in your life. Why aren't others that want to do it doing it?
Such a good question, because I do, hear that a lot. People saying, "Oh, I wish I could do what you're doing." And I often sort of feel like a lot of them probably could. And the reality is that I am probably lucky in some ways, specifically work-wise, having that ability to work remote, though at the same time, a lot of people could make that work these days. So I often feel, when people say that, a lot of them could if they really wanted to. And so why don't they? I do think that there is an element of, fear and uncertainty. We do live in a world where, despite it, like it sometimes feels like our society and our world is so liberal and open-minded these days, and everyone and everything is supported. And that's, probably true, and it's getting more like that, which is really awesome and really exciting. However, I do think that there actually still is a lot of pressure to be on that traditional path in life, right? To get married, to have kids, and to work your 9 to 5. And so I think a lot of people are scared and just uncertain about, stepping away from that, because there's not a lot of role models, there's not a lot of stories, and not a lot of examples of, people doing that. So I think that that is a big part of it. However, I also think that for some people, it kind of just comes down to priorities, right? So they might look at my life and they think, "Oh, that's exciting, I want to do that." But when they really think about it and they really, get into the detail of it and the pros and cons, then they realize actually there's other things they want more. And whether that's, the stability and the family life and, knowing your neighbors and having your, regular activities and your stable community around you, or, whether it is the high-flying career and the wealth and status that comes with that, or, whatever else it is. So, I do think that this kind of lifestyle, specifically the way I'm living, it always looks really exciting and fun, and social media and other channels certainly make it look that way, and it is, but it has downsides, right? Like everything in life, it has downsides, and it is ultimately a trade-off. And I think that a lot of people, when they really think about it, they realize that maybe as much as they love the idea of living this way, ultimately there's other things they want even more.
No matter what lifestyle you choose, there's always compromises. What are some of the compromises, or like some of the hard parts of living in a van or living in a trailer that maybe people wouldn't expect who, just watch, a YouTube content creator or read your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there is a bunch, and I do think it's a little bit different for everyone, right? But obviously there is the living in a small space, part that just isn't for everyone. And I personally love that. I love living in a small, cozy space, but it isn't for everyone. I know people who've tried it, and it just, doesn't work out for them. And I think there is the, so for me, if I think about it, like in the beginning, it was all like fun, and the only real challenges were like the little, day-to-day admin stuff of this, like finding a place to park, finding your way around, learning all the ins and outs of camper life. But that was challenging, but at the same time, nothing you couldn't sort of overcome and deal with. And, you have those in every kind of lifestyle, I'd say. As time went on, something that became more of a challenge for me that people maybe don't expect as much is that you're constantly in public spaces. You don't ever sort of, control your environment, if you know what I mean. It's you're either on campgrounds or on someone else's property or just on, completely public land. And so you never quite know what's going to happen around you. If someone parks next to you and wants to have a party, you're having a party. And people are sort of just walking, you sit there in your lounge and you've got your windows open and random people just walk straight behind and look in and, those sort of things. And so after a few years, that started to bother me a little bit sometimes. And I found that a bit challenging, that I've never sort of got my own space in that sense. And then the big one, as time went on a few years later, and I've heard this from a lot of other people who, live nomadic lifestyles, is the lack of community and connection. You're always on the move and you meet amazing people. And there is a really amazing nomadic community here in New Zealand, but also globally. But everyone's always on the move, by nature. And so you might cross path and you might even travel together for a few days, but eventually everyone sort of heads off in their own direction again. And so I found it increasingly hard to feel connected to people and society. And, I had my old friends in Auckland who'd continued on their path in life, which was quite different to mine. And I had my new nomadic friends who were kind of coming and going out of my life. And so I started to miss this sense of belonging and community that comes from living in one place where, you know your neighbors and the people at the coffee shop down the road know your name and, those sort of things. So that was, I think the big one for me, the biggest downside of the lifestyle.
And have you found a way to address that so you don't have this, lack of community?
Yes, I'm working on that right now, actually. I've last year sold the camper van that I was traveling in for a while. And I spent a few months house sitting and just floating around, even less connected than ever. But early this year, I ended up buying a caravan, which is, a luxury home by my standards because it's like 3 times the size of my van. So that's exciting. So caravan is a trailer for, I think in the US, they might call it it's not really a fifth wheeler, but yeah, a trailer. And so what I'm doing right now, I'm spending, I've given myself a year. So I'm spending a year on a campground in Christchurch on the South Island in New Zealand. And the idea is to essentially build this up as sort of a home base and then travel from here, but always kind of keep coming back here. So I have I have the sense of a home that I can come back to. And I've already, made some friends on the campground here, and I've met some other friends, in the surrounding area, and sort of starting to feel a bit more at home. It's a really nice spot here. I've got the beach is sort of, 3-minute walk that way, and I've got a really nice walkways 2 minutes that way, and so it's starting to feel like home, and like I've got my home beach again and my home coffee shop, and so that's really nice. So that's my what I'm doing right now, just to have that sense of belonging and community again.
In reading the reviews on your book, it really struck a nerve with readers. And there's long reviews talking about how the book impacted them and how it resonated so deeply, which, I'm a reader and I like to read, other people's reviews, but I rarely see so many that are as long as your book. Why do you think it connected so deeply with so many of the readers?
Yeah. Look, first of all, it honestly means the world to me. Like that's the reason I write books and I put them out there. To hear that, it's just the most amazing thing in the world. And the reviews, and I also regularly get messages from people who've read the book, who, it just made them feel something. And that's incredible. Honestly brings tears to my eyes every time. But, I think I knew that the book was going to resonate with a certain type of person, which is essentially me, right? Like, women in their 30s and 40s who, either chose not to do the whole kids marriage thing or who are unsure about it and, asking themselves similar questions to what I did. And I knew that for them, because there's so few books who tell those stories, right? There's very few books about being child-free. There's even fewer about being single and being happy about it and, not running around looking for a husband desperately. And so I knew those types of people, they would resonate with this just because there is so few. what really surprised me in the best way possible is how many people I've heard from who live, very different from me, who followed the traditional path, who are very happy with that, who are happy to be moms and married or dads, and who live that life. And still, like, my book, something really resonated with them and spoke to them. And that really surprised me. And I think what it is that ultimately, while it is a story about living in a van and, choosing not to have children and all that stuff, I think ultimately it's just a story about a woman finding herself, asking herself those big questions, learning to listen to herself, challenging the expectations of, society, and learning to overcome that, and the fulfillment, the happiness, the pride that comes from doing that, from being true to yourself. And I think that's what resonates with people. And I think that, no matter how you live your life, everyone can relate to that, right? The wanting to be true to yourself, and how hard that can be sometimes. And so I think that's why, maybe it resonates with so many people from so many different walks of life. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That sounds logical to me. Your recent blog is all about living with intent, and it's really interesting how you talk about this. But can you maybe share what living with intent means to you and why you think it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, we've touched on it before, and it's one of my favorite topics. And I think there's a really good way to describe it. I go back a little bit here. There is I'm pretty sure it's still on YouTube if people look for it. There's this experiment that they did. I think they've repeated it a few times since. There's probably a few videos. But there's this example where they put a bunch of actors into a waiting room at I think it was a doctor's office or something like that. So there's a bunch of actors, and the actors were told every time this beep sounds, they stand up. That's it, right? So beep, and they all stand up. And then the first person walks in who's not an actor and who doesn't know what's going on. And so they sit down, and then the beep sounds and everyone stands up. And they watch this a few times. And at first they're like, oh, what's going on here? And they ask some questions, but they don't get an answer. And before you know it, they're standing up too, right? So then this person who doesn't know why hears this beep. And because everyone else is standing up, they're standing up. And then one by one, the actors get called out of the waiting room to their appointment, and more random people who don't know what's going on come in. And all the same, they all start standing up after a while. And so at some point, there's this whole group of people who don't know why, but, every time the beep sounds, they stand up. And so to me, that is a perfect example of what so easily happens to us in society. And look, I'm guilty of that too, right? Like, I find myself still constantly doing things, and then all of a sudden I realize, hey, why am I doing this? Just because everyone else is doing it? But I think that today more than ever, because we, through social media and other outlets, we're exposed so much more to these sort of messages. It is so easy to fall into this pattern where you live your life in a way just because everyone else is living their life that way. And for me, living with intent is not doing that, right? And it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. So for me, the problem with this example that I gave is not that everyone stands up with the beep, it's that they stand up and they don't know why, right? And so for me, there's nothing wrong with living that traditional life around getting married and having kids and working, right? If that's what you want, then the more power to you. Like, I know so many people who've chosen that and who are very happy in that, and I think that's great, right? So living with intent does not mean quit your job and live in a van and travel, New Zealand. It means, figuring out what you want, making decisions, living life on purpose, and not just, living life the way everyone else is doing. So that's really, what it is about for me. It's not what you do, it's why you do it and how you do it.
That's such a great way to end this. I love that story. I've never heard that story. But it's true. It's, finding what's an authentic way to live that is meaningful to you. And when you find it, life's just so much easier, isn't it?
And look, it is and it isn't. It is hard sometimes. I find it so, sometimes I have moments where it's like, man, why can't I just be like everyone else? Why can't I just want all these things everyone else seems to want? Because in a way, I think sometimes life would be easier. Maybe it wouldn't, I don't know. But it can be hard, especially when you realize that the way you want to live life is not like everyone else, wants to live theirs. But I've just learned for me that being different might be hard, but, living a life that's not true to yourself is a lot harder. And so that's the incentive for me.
Beautifully said. If people want to find your book or check out your writing, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the latest book's Life Done Differently, One Woman's Journey on the Road Less Traveled. It's on Amazon and pretty much anywhere else you would get your books, an ebook and print. I also write a blog. I've got a website that's lifedonedifferently.com. And from there you can find my socials and reach out to me, and always love hearing from people from all over the world. So please do reach out.
Excellent. Lisa, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story. It's just such a empowering story and such a incredible, decision you've made for how you live your life. It's just really great to hear about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome having a chat.
Excellent. I'll put links in the show notes for Lisa's website and a link for Amazon. And with that, thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.